The fluorescent lights of Bella Notte hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow that made my reflection in the polished wine glasses look even more exhausted than I felt. My lower back ached with a persistent throb that had started around hour 6 of my shift and had only intensified as the evening wore on. 7 months pregnant and working a double, not my smartest decision, but rent didn't pay itself. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Table 12 needs water refills. Marco called from behind the bar. His weathered face creased with concern as he watched me pause to press a hand against my spine. Emma, you sure you're okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile as I reached for the water pitcher. The weight of it made my arm tremble slightly, but I steadied myself against the counter. Just tired. How much longer on the Cristallo party? Marco glanced toward the private dining room in the back, the one we only opened for VIP reservations. They just got their entrees. Probably another hour, maybe 2 if they order dessert and after-dinner drinks. He lowered his voice. Big tips from that crowd, though. Romano always takes care of the staff. My hand froze on the pitcher. Romano? Dante Romano. Marco's expression shifted to something between respect and wariness. You know, the businessman. Owns half the development projects downtown. That new arts center. I know who he is. I interrupted quietly, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. Of course I knew. The whole city knew Dante Romano, even if most people pretended not to understand exactly what kind of business he really conducted. Import-export, they called it. Development and investment. Legitimate enterprises that somehow generated enough wealth and influence to make politicians nervous and rival businessmen disappear. But I knew him in a different way, a way that made my cheeks flush hot even as my blood ran cold. 7 months and 3 weeks ago, I'd been catering a charity gala at the Grandview Hotel. Black tie, champagne towers, silent auctions for causes the wealthy could claim on their taxes. I'd been circulating with a tray of canapes, invisible in my crisp white shirt and black vest, just another servant ensuring the elite had a pleasant evening. He'd been standing alone on the terrace, his back to the glittering party inside, staring out at the city lights below. Even from behind, he'd been striking broad shoulders in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, an aura of coiled power that seemed to create a buffer zone around him. No one approached, no one dared. I should have kept walking, should have let him have his solitude. But something about the tension in his shoulders, the way he gripped the balcony railing, like he was holding himself back from something violent, made me pause. The shrimp puffs are better than they look, I'd said, offering the tray with a small smile. If you're hungry. He'd turned, and I'd nearly dropped the entire tray. Dark eyes, almost black in the moonlight, had fixed on me with an intensity that felt physical. His face was all sharp angles and shadowed planes, handsome in a severe, almost dangerous way. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against olive skin. He couldn't have been more than 35, but something in his expression suggested he'd lived several lifetimes already. You're not afraid of me, he'd said. Not a question, but an observation, his voice deep and slightly rough, like whiskey over gravel. Should I be? I'd asked, though my pulse was racing. The corner of his mouth had lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. Most people are. Most people probably know who you are. And you don't? I'd shrugged. I'm just trying to get through my shift without dropping anything. Your reputation, whatever it is, doesn't affect the quality of these shrimp puffs. He'd actually laughed then, a real sound of surprised amusement that transformed his entire face. What's your name? Emma Chen. Dante Romano. He'd taken a shrimp puff, his fingers brushing mine briefly. The contact had sent electricity up my arm. And you're right. These are better than they look. We'd talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, everything important. He'd asked about my life with genuine curiosity, not the performative interest wealthy people sometimes showed service workers. I'd told him about nursing school, about working 3 jobs to afford it, about losing my parents in a car accident when I was 19 and having to figure out adulthood alone. He'd listened in a way that made me feel seen, not pitied. When I'd asked about his work, he'd been honest in his vagueness. I solve problems for people. Sometimes those solutions are legal. Sometimes they're pragmatic. The chemistry between us had been undeniable, dangerous, intoxicating. When the catering manager had called me back inside, Dante had caught my wrist gently. "Stay after your shift ends. Please." I should have said no. Every rational part of my brain had screamed warnings, but there was something in his eyes' loneliness that mirrored my own, hunger for connection that went beyond physical that made me nod. 3 hours later, we'd been in his penthouse suite. The sex had been intense, consuming, tender, and rough all at once. He'd touched me like I was precious, like I mattered, like I was more than just another conquest. We'd talked until dawn, curled together in Egyptian cotton sheets, sharing stories and silences with equal comfort. "I want to see you again," he'd said, as morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. And I'd panicked, because in the harsh light of day, reality had reasserted itself. He was Dante Romano, powerful, dangerous, living in a world I couldn't begin to navigate. I was Emma Chen, a broke nursing student who couldn't afford to get tangled up with a man whose business associates probably carried guns. "Last night was amazing," I'd said, already gathering my clothes, "but I think we both know it can't be more than that. Different worlds, you know?" Something had flashed in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or frustration, but he'd nodded slowly. "If that's what you want." He'd given me his card anyway, made me promise to call if I ever needed anything. I'd taken it to be polite, knowing I'd never use it. Then I'd slipped out of his suite and his life, certain I was making the smart choice. 6 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. "Emma?" Marco's voice snapped me back to the present. "You sure you're okay? You just went white as a sheet." I realized I was still gripping the water pitcher, my knuckles pale with tension. "I'm fine. It's warm in here. It's 65 degrees. Pregnancy hormones." I forced myself to release the pitcher, flexing my cramping fingers. "I'll take water to table 12. "Absolutely not." Marco crossed his arms. "You're not going near the Cristallo room." "I'll have Tony." "Marco, I need those tips." My voice came out sharper than intended, edged with desperation I couldn't quite hide. "You know I do. I'm already short on rent, and the baby's coming in 2 months. I can't afford to turn down a high-paying table." His expression softened with sympathy that made my throat tight. Marco had been like an uncle to me since I'd started at Bella Notte 3 years ago, always looking out for me, covering shifts when I had exams, saving me extra family meal portions when he knew I was skipping meals to save money. "Emma, mija, you can barely stand. Let Tony take it. I'll make sure you get a cut." "I'm fine," I insisted, already reaching for my order pad and the water pitcher. "Really, it's just pregnancy stuff, backache, tired feet. Nothing serious. I only have 2 more hours up on the clock anyway." Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but a surge of dinner rush customers at the bar pulled his attention. "Fine, but you take a break after you do their water refills. Sit down, eat something. That's non-negotiable." I nodded, already moving toward the Cristallo room before he could change his mind or see how badly my hands were shaking. The baby did a series of sharp kicks against my ribs, as if expressing her own opinion about this terrible decision. I pressed a hand against my swollen belly, feeling her movement beneath my palm. "I know, little one," I whispered. "But we need to eat next week, so Mama's going to pull it together." The Cristallo room was through a set of frosted glass doors at the rear of the restaurant. It could seat 20, but tonight, only the large circular table in the center was occupied. Through the glass, I could see 6 figures, 5 men in expensive suits, and 1 woman in a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I paused outside the doors, using the reflection in the glass to check my appearance. My black server's uniform, a white button-down shirt, and black slacks that I'd had to special order in maternity sizing was still neat despite the long shift. My dark hair, pulled back in a sleek ponytail, had a few strands escaping around my face. I looked tired, pale, and very obviously pregnant, but professional enough. Taking a deep breath that did nothing to calm my racing heart, I pushed through the doors. The conversation at the table stopped immediately. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me, but I felt only one gaze like a physical touch. Dante Romano sat at the head of the table, a king holding court. He wore a charcoal suit that must have been custom-made to fit his broad shoulders so perfectly. His dark hair was shorter than I remembered, styled back from his face in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of his features. Those eyes, God, those eyes fixed on me with the same intensity I remembered from that night on the terrace. For a moment, I saw recognition flicker across his face. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, his hand freezing halfway to his wine glass. Then his gaze dropped to my very pregnant belly, and something changed in his expression. Something went hard and cold. "Good evening," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. I moved to the table, started filling water glasses with mechanical precision. "Can I get anyone anything else? More wine, perhaps?" "Our sommelier has an excellent selection, Emma." My name from his lips made me fumble. Water sloshed over the rim of the glass I was filling, splashing onto the white tablecloth. "I'm so sorry. Let me—" "Emma Chen." Not a question. A statement laden with subtext I couldn't begin to unpack. The other people at the table had gone very quiet, watching this exchange with the alert interest of those who sensed drama. "Yes, sir." I dabbed at the spilled water with my towel, not meeting his eyes. "Again, I apologize. Can I get you? When are you due?" The question hung in the air. The woman in the red dress was watching me with sharp calculation. One of the men, silver-haired and wearing a Rolex that could probably pay off my student loans, had a slight smile playing at his lips. 2 months, I said quietly, still not looking up. "Now, about those drinks. 7 months pregnant." His voice had gone very soft, very dangerous. "And you're on your feet for, how long? 8 hours? 10? It's my job, Mr. Romano." Finally, I looked at him, meeting that intense gaze with as much dignity as I could muster, and I'm perfectly capable of doing it. "Now, would anyone like to see the dessert menu, or shall I give you a few more minutes with your entrees?" His jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath his olive skin. Something unreadable passed across his face, anger, concern, before the mask of polite disinterest slid back into place. "We'll take a few minutes." "Of course." I finished the water refills, hyper-aware of his eyes tracking my every movement. "I'll check back shortly." I was almost to the doors when the room tilted sideways. It happened so fast. One moment I was walking, relieved to have survived the encounter. The next, the floor seemed to rush up toward me. My vision tunneled to a pinpoint, then went black around the edges. I heard the water pitcher shatter somewhere far away, heard voices shouting as if through water. Then there were hands catching me strong, sure, familiar. A deep voice cursing fluently in Italian. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him, a smell that brought back memories of tangled sheets and whispered confessions. "Get my car," Dante's voice, sharp with command. "Now, and call Dr. Castellano. Tell him I'm bringing someone in. Pregnant, collapsed. I need him at the hospital in 20 minutes. Dante, we're in the middle of—" Someone started. "I don't give a fuck what we're in the middle of. Move." I tried to speak, to tell him I was fine, that I just needed a moment, but my tongue wouldn't work. The darkness was pulling me down, warm and soft, and terrifying. "Emma." His face swam into focus above me, those dark eyes now blazing with something fierce. "Stay with me. Don't you dare pass out on me. Emma, can you hear me?" I managed a weak nod. His arms tightened around me, lifting me as if I weighed nothing. The baby kicked hard. A protest or reassurance, I couldn't tell which. "The baby," I managed to whisper. "Is she—" "Shh. Don't talk. Save your strength." He was moving fast, carrying me through the restaurant. I was dimly aware of shocked faces. Marco shouting something, the cool night air hitting my face as we burst through the front doors. "You're going to be fine. Both of you. I'm going to make sure of it. You don't understand." I tried again, the words slurring. "She's yours. The baby. But the darkness finally won, pulling me under like a wave. The last thing I felt was his arms around me, strong and sure. And the last thing I heard was his voice, raw with an emotion I couldn't name. "I know. God help me, Emma. I know." Then there was nothing but black. I woke to the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital. My eyelids felt heavy, weighted down by exhaustion that went bone deep. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten here. Then it all came rushing back: the restaurant, the water pitcher, Dante's face above me as the world went dark. My hands flew to my belly. "The baby is fine." A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Heart rate is strong. She's moving well. Try to stay calm, miss." "Chen." I forced my eyes open, blinking against the bright overhead lights. The hospital room was private, spacious. Nothing like the crowded wards I'd done my clinical rotations in. A nurse in navy scrubs stood beside my bed, checking the IV in my arm with practiced efficiency. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Where am I?" My voice came out raspy, my throat dry. "Street Augustine's, private wing." She adjusted something on the IV pole. "You were brought in about 45 minutes ago, dehydrated, exhausted, and showing signs of preeclampsia. Dr. Castellano is reviewing your labs now." Preeclampsia. The word sent ice through my veins. I'd studied it in nursing school, knew the risks: seizures, stroke, placental abruption, danger for both mother and baby if left untreated. "How bad?" I asked, trying to sit up. The nurse gently but firmly pressed me back down. "Your blood pressure was 160 over 110 when you came in. We've got you on magnesium sulfate to prevent seizures and medications to bring it down. You're stable now, but Dr. Castellano will want to keep you for observation. At least 48 hours, possibly longer depending on how you respond to treatment." 48 hours. The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't afford 48 hours in a hospital, especially not a private room at Street Augustine's. My insurance, the bare-bones catastrophic plan I'd scraped together money for, would cover almost nothing. I'd be drowning in medical debt before the baby even arrived. "I can't," I said, already reaching for the IV line. "I need to go. I have to work. I can't afford Miss Chen." The nurse's hand closed over mine, stopping me. "You collapsed. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. If you leave now, you could have a stroke. Your baby could die. You could die. Is that really worth avoiding a hospital bill?" Put that way, it sounded insane. But she didn't understand. Medical debt didn't go away. It would follow me for years, garnishing wages I desperately needed, destroying any chance of financial stability. How could I provide for my daughter if I was buried under thousands of dollars in bills I had no way to pay? "I don't have anyone," I whispered, hating how my voice broke. "No family, no partner. I'm doing this alone. If I can't work, I can't pay rent. If I can't pay rent, I'm homeless with a newborn. So yes, maybe it is worth the risk." The nurse's expression softened. "You're not alone right now. The man who brought you in, he's been pacing the hallway for the past 45 minutes. Drove our security crazy until we let him through. He's the one who called in our best maternal fetal specialist, demanded you get a private room, said cost wasn't an issue. Of course he did. Dante Romano, solving problems with money and authority, the way he solved everything. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought a complicated tangle of gratitude and dread. Because nothing with Dante came without strings. Every gift had a price, even if he didn't name it up front. "I need to talk to him," I said. "You need to rest." But the nurse was already moving toward the door. "I'll tell him you're awake." 5 minutes, Miss Chen. Then you sleep. Doctor's orders." She slipped out, leaving me alone with the beeping monitors and my spiraling thoughts. I smoothed my hands over my belly, feeling the baby shift beneath my palms. She was okay. We were both okay. For now, that was what mattered. The door opened again. Dante stepped through, and the room suddenly felt smaller. He'd removed his suit jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Those dark eyes swept over me, cataloging every detail with an intensity that made me want to hide and be seen all at once. "How are you feeling?" His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Like I made a spectacular scene in your business dinner." I tried for levity, but it fell flat. "I'm sorry about that, and thank you for getting me here. For calling the doctor. You didn't have to." "Don't." He moved closer, stopping at the foot of my bed. His hands gripped the railing, knuckles, white with tension. "Don't thank me for basic human decency. You collapsed in my arms, Emma. You and..." His gaze dropped to my belly. "You were unconscious." The weight of everything unsaid hung between us. I could see him working through it, that sharp mind calculating timelines, possibilities, probabilities. 7 months pregnant. 1 night together, 7 months and 3 weeks ago. The math was simple and damning. "Before you ask," I said quietly, "yes, she's yours." The words seemed to echo in the quiet room. Dante went very still, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he just stared at me, and I couldn't tell if what I saw in his eyes was anger or shock or something else entirely. You were going to tell me when, exactly? His voice was dangerously soft. After she was born? When she graduated high school? Never? I don't know. The honest answer seemed safest. I was terrified. Okay? You're Dante Romano. I'm a nursing student working 3 jobs to survive. You live in a penthouse. I can barely afford a studio apartment. You have people who... I stopped, not wanting to voice what we both knew. Your world isn't safe for a child. For my child. Our child. He bit out the words. She's my daughter, Emma. Mine. And you kept her from me. To protect her, I countered, feeling tears prick my eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones. Can you honestly tell me your life is safe? That bringing a baby into it wouldn't make her a target? You said it yourself that night you solve problems, and sometimes those solutions aren't legal. What happens when your enemies decide a baby is the perfect leverage? His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. So you decided to raise her alone? Working yourself into the ground? You collapsed, Emma. You're 7 months pregnant with preeclampsia, and you were carrying a water pitcher because you needed the tips. That's your idea of protection? The accusation stung because it was true. I'd told myself I was being noble, keeping my daughter away from danger. But the reality was messier, harder. I'd been alone, struggling, slowly drowning while trying to convince myself I was swimming. I was doing my best. I whispered. Your best nearly killed you both tonight. He released the railing, paced to the window, his movements sharp with barely contained emotion. The doctor said if you'd gone much longer without treatment, you could have had a seizure. Your blood pressure was high enough to cause a stroke. Do you understand that? You could have died. Our daughter could have died. I didn't know, I said, my voice breaking. I was tired, my back hurt, but I've been tired and sore for months. I thought it was just pregnancy. I couldn't afford regular prenatal care, so I went to the free clinic when I could. But they're always so busy, and I stopped, pressing my hands over my face as tears finally spilled over. The stress of the past months, the fear, the loneliness, the constant grinding worry about money, it all came crashing down at once. I'd been holding it together with sheer willpower, and now that willpower had run out. The bed dipped. Warm hands gently pulled mine away from my face. Dante had moved to sit beside me, his expression no longer hard, but something softer and more dangerous. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I shouldn't have. You're right. My world isn't safe. I know that. But Emma, you should have told me anyway. I could have helped. I could have... taken over? I interrupted, wiping at my tears. Made decisions for me? Decided what was best without asking what I wanted? His lips twitched in something that might have been amusement in other circumstances. Fair point. I have a tendency toward that. I noticed. I took a shaky breath. That night, it was perfect because it was just us. No complications. No power dynamics. Just 2 people connecting. But in the real world, you're you, and I'm me. And there's no universe where that works without you trying to control everything. I don't try to control everything, he said. Then, at my look, fine, I do. It's who I am. How I've survived this long. His hand came up, hesitated, then settled gently on my belly. But this changes things. The touch was tender, reverent even. The baby kicked against his palm, a flutter that made his eyes widen with wonder. Something in my chest cracked at the expression on his face. Fierce protectiveness mixed with a vulnerability I'd never expected to see from him. She kicked, he said softly. Our daughter just kicked. She does that a lot, usually when I'm trying to sleep. I placed my hand over his, the gesture feeling both intimate and dangerous. I call her Bean, because when I first saw her on the ultrasound at 8 weeks, she looked like a little bean, Bean. He said it like he was testing the name, seeing how it fit. When are you due? 8 weeks. Mid-March. Around the 15th. And you plan to do this alone? Labor, delivery, bringing her home to that apartment Marco told me about? I stiffened. You had Marco tell you where I live? I had people find out everything about you the moment you walked away from that hospital room unconscious in my arms. No apology. Just that blunt honesty that was somehow both infuriating and refreshing. I know you're 4 months behind on rent. I know your landlord filed eviction papers last week. I know you dropped out of nursing school because you couldn't afford tuition while saving for baby expenses. I know you've been working yourself to death trying to hold it together. The invasion of privacy should have made me furious. Instead, I just felt exhausted. So you've done your research. What now? You swoop in and fix everything? Take over my life because I'm clearly incompetent? No. His other hand came up to cut my face, thumb brushing away tears I hadn't realized were still falling. Now I ask what you need. What would help? What would make you feel safe and supported, without feeling like I'm steamrolling you? The question surprised me so much that for a moment I could only stare. This wasn't the Dante I'd expected, the commanding, controlling figure Marco whispered about. This was something else, someone trying, despite his nature, to give me agency. I don't know, I admitted. I've been so focused on survival, on making it to the next day, that I haven't let myself think about what I actually need. Then let me tell you what I need, he said, his voice low and intense. I need to know my daughter is safe. I need to know you're healthy and not collapsing from exhaustion. I need to not lie awake wondering if you're okay because you're too proud or too scared to ask for help. And in exchange? Because there was always an exchange with men like him. His jaw tightened. In exchange, you let me be her father. You let me be part of this. And Emma? His eyes held mine, dark and unreadable. You let me figure out if we can be more than one perfect. Night 7 months ago. My heart stuttered. Dante, I'm not asking for an answer now. You're exhausted, you're sick, and you're in a hospital bed. This isn't the time. He stood, but kept one hand on my belly, on our daughter. But when you're better, when you're ready, we're going to talk. Really talk. About what happens next. About how we do this together. I don't need saving, I said, needing him to understand. I'm not some damsel for you to rescue. I know. A hint of a smile touched his lips. You're the woman who walked up to me on a terrace when everyone else was too scared. Who told me shrimp puffs were better than they looked. Who made me laugh for the first time in months. His expression sobered. You're also the mother of my child, and you're in trouble whether you want to admit it or not. So let me help. Please. The please did it. That single word, so rarely used by a man who was used to taking what he wanted, broke through my defenses. Okay, I whispered. We can talk. When I'm out of here, when things are less, crisis mode, we'll figure something out. Good. He leaned down, pressed a kiss to my forehead that felt like a promise and a warning all at once. Get some rest. I'll be here. You don't have to. I'll be here, he repeated, firmer now. I've already handled things with the restaurant. Marco sends his love, by the way, and your rent is paid through the end of next year. Your landlord won't be bothering you anymore. Dante, you can't just sleep, Emma. He moved toward the door. We'll argue about my high-handed methods later. Right now, you need rest, and our daughter needs you healthy. He slipped out before I could protest further, leaving me alone with the monitors and my racing thoughts. I should have been angry about him paying my rent, about him investigating my life, about him making decisions without asking. But lying there in that quiet hospital room, feeling the baby move beneath my hands, all I felt was relief. For the first time in 7 months, I wasn't alone, and that terrified me more than anything else. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of monitoring, medications, and doctors who spoke in careful tones about managing the preeclampsia and optimizing outcomes for both mother and baby. My blood pressure came down slowly, stubbornly, requiring adjustments to my medication that left me dizzy and nauseous. Dante was there through all of it, not hovering, exactly. He'd positioned himself in the chair by the window, laptop open, phone constantly buzzing with calls and messages he mostly ignored. But every time a nurse came to check my vitals, every time a doctor entered with new test results, he looked up with laser focus, absorbing every word, asking questions I was too tired to think of. Is this normal for preeclampsia? He'd asked Dr. Castellano during the morning rounds on day 2. The continued nausea despite the antiemetics? The doctor, a silver-haired man with the calm demeanor of someone used to high-pressure situations, had nodded approvingly. It can be. The magnesium sulfate often causes nausea as a side effect. We're balancing seizure prevention against quality of life. If it becomes unbearable, we can adjust. It's fine, I'd interjected quickly. I can handle it. Dante's gaze had shifted to me, something unreadable in those dark eyes. You don't have to handle everything, Emma. But I did. That was the thing he didn't understand. I'd been handling everything alone for so long that accepting help felt like admitting defeat, like confirming what I'd been terrified of all along, that I couldn't do this on my own. On the evening of the second day, Dr. Castellano declared me stable enough for discharge with strict conditions: bed rest as much as possible, weekly monitoring appointments, a detailed list of warning signs that should send me straight back to the emergency room. "You were lucky, Miss Chen," he said, his expression grave. "Another few days without treatment, and we'd be having a very different conversation, possibly about emergency delivery at 30 weeks. The words made my blood run cold. 30 weeks would have meant a 10-week premature baby, potentially months in the NICU, complications that could last a lifetime. All because I'd been too proud, too scared, too stubborn to ask for help. "She understands," Dante said when I couldn't find words. "It won't happen again." After Dr. Castellano left, I finally asked the question that had been gnawing at me. How much does all this cost? The private room, the specialist, the 48 hours of monitoring? Dante didn't look up from his laptop. "It's handled." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." He closed the laptop, fixed me with that intense gaze. "Your insurance covered what it covered. I covered the rest. It's done. I can't let you just... Emma." He stood, moved to sit on the edge of my bed. "Our daughter is healthy, because you got treatment in time. You're alive because you got treatment in time. That's worth any amount of money. Please don't insult me by arguing about it." Put that way, what could I say? That my pride was more important than our baby's health? That I'd rather have risked both our lives than accept his help? It sounded insane even in my own head. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I mean it. Thank you for all of this." His hand found mine, fingers interlacing with a familiarity that shouldn't have felt so natural after one night 7 months ago. "We need to talk about what happens next." My stomach clenched, and not from the medication. "I'm being discharged to my apartment. I'll rest like the doctor said. I'll go to the follow-up appointments. You're not going back to that apartment." The flat statement made my defenses snap up immediately. "Excuse me? I had someone inspect it while you were here. The building has black mold in the walls. The heating system is barely functional. And there's a documented rat problem." His expression was carved from stone. "I'm not letting my daughter live in those conditions." "I'm not letting you live in those conditions. You can't just decide where I live," I said, trying to pull my hand away. He held firm, not painfully, but unmovable. "I can when your current living situation is actively dangerous to your health." He took a breath, visibly trying to moderate his tone. "Emma, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you both safe. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like you making decisions without asking what I want." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Fine. What do you want? Tell me your ideal scenario, and let's see if we can make it work." The question caught me off guard. I'd expected argument, maybe even ultimatums. Not this an actual invitation to state my needs. "I want." I paused, trying to articulate desires I'd barely let myself acknowledge. "I want a safe place to live. Not luxurious, just clean and warm and structurally sound. I want to be able to afford food and utilities without having to choose between them. I want to finish nursing school eventually, after Bean is born and old enough for childcare." I met his eyes. And I want to do it without feeling like I'm being kept, like I'm dependent on your goodwill that could disappear the moment you get bored or angry." He absorbed this in silence, his thumb tracing absent patterns on the back of my hand. "Okay, here's what I'm proposing. Tell me if any of it crosses your lines." I nodded, wary but willing to listen. "I own a building in Riverside. Residential, mostly young professionals, good security, well-maintained. There's a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor that's been vacant for a month. I'll put the lease in your name, genuinely yours, not some arrangement where I'm the landlord. Market rate rent, which I know you can't afford right now, so I'll cover it as child support. Advanced child support," he clarified, seeing me start to object. "For our daughter, not charity for you." It was a distinction that probably shouldn't have mattered, but somehow did. Child support I could accept, eventually pay back or balance out. Charity felt like a debt I could never repay. "Go on," I said carefully. The building has a mother's helper program, essentially. There's a retired pediatric nurse on the first floor who helps new parents for reasonable rates. She could check on you during bed rest, help with Bean after she's born, give you breaks when you need them. All optional, no pressure. And the catch? His lips quirked slightly. You're assuming there's a catch. There's always a catch with arrangements like this. The catch, he said slowly, is that I want to be involved. Doctor's appointments, preparing for Bean's arrival, being there for the birth if you'll let me. I want to be her father, Emma. Really be her father, not some weekend visitor who sends checks and shows up for birthdays. The raw honesty in his voice made my throat tight. This wasn't the cold, calculating mafia boss Marco whispered about. This was a man who'd discovered he had a daughter and was terrified of losing her before he'd even gotten to know her. What about your world? I asked. The dangerous parts you can't walk away from? I keep them separate. His hand tightened on mine. My business, my obligations, they don't touch you or Bean. I've already made arrangements. Increased security around your building. Background checks on all the residents. Protocols if there's ever a threat. You won't see it, but it'll be there. That's not keeping us separate from your world, I pointed out. That's pulling us into it with security as a buffer. Would you rather I pretend there's no risk? That having a child with me doesn't come with complications? His frustration bled through. I can't make my life completely safe, Emma. I wish I could, but I can't. What I can do is minimize the risks, protect what's mine, and be honest about the reality we're navigating. What's mine? The possessive phrase should have raised red flags. Instead, it sent a traitorous flutter through my chest. I need boundaries, I said. Clear ones. If I agree to this arrangement, I need to know you'll respect them. Name them. I took a breath. You don't make decisions about Bean without consulting me first. Not about doctors, not about childcare, not about her name or how we raise her. We discuss, we compromise, but you don't just decide. Agreed. You don't use money as leverage. If we disagree about something, you don't threaten to pull financial support to get your way. Agreed. No hesitation. And you don't. We're not. I struggled with how to phrase it. What happened between us 7 months ago was one night. This arrangement is about Bean, not about us trying to recreate that or forcing some relationship that doesn't exist. Something flickered in. His eyes disappointment? Hurt? But he nodded. If that's what you want, then that's the boundary. Co-parents. Not. He trailed off. Not lovers. I finished quietly. Not a couple. Just 2 people raising a daughter together. Just that, he agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't quite believe it would stay that simple. Neither did I, if I was honest. But saying it out loud, establishing that boundary, felt necessary. Dante Romano was magnetic, compelling, dangerous, in ways that had nothing to do with his business. One night with him had resulted in a pregnancy that changed everything. Letting myself fall into something more while I was vulnerable and dependent felt like a recipe for disaster. Okay, I said. I'll take the apartment as Bean's child support, and you can be involved, be her father. But we do this carefully, with clear boundaries, and the moment I feel like those boundaries are being crossed, you tell me, he interrupted, and I adjust. I'm not perfect. At this, Emma. I'm used to getting my way, used to controlling situations. But I'll try. For Bean. For you. The sincerity in his voice undid something in my chest. Then we have an agreement. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to my knuckles that sent heat racing up my arm. We have an agreement. The apartment was beautiful. I tried not to let that matter. Tried to stay pragmatic and focused on the practical aspects. The working heat, the functioning appliances, the absence of mold or rodents. But standing in the middle of the bright living room 2 days after my hospital discharge, I couldn't help but feel overwhelming relief. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, an actual kitchen with a full-size stove and refrigerator that didn't make concerning noises. Hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through large windows that overlooked a small neighborhood park. The walls were freshly painted in soft cream. The bathroom fixtures were modern and clean, and there was even a small balcony off the living room with just enough space for a chair and some plants. The nursery is this way, Dante said, appearing in the doorway with another box from the moving truck. He'd insisted on hiring movers to transport my meager possessions from the old apartment, but had shown up personally to help unpack. He was dressed down today, dark jeans and a black Henley that clung to his shoulders in ways I was trying very hard not to notice. His sleeves were pushed up, revealing those strong forearms I remembered too well. There was something dangerously domestic about seeing him like this, carrying boxes and discussing nursery setups like a normal expectant father, rather than a mafia boss arranging his daughter's domain. I followed him to the second bedroom, smaller than the master but still spacious by my previous standards. Late afternoon light filled the room, making it feel warm and welcoming. I didn't want to presume, Dante said, setting the box down, carefully. But I had some basics delivered. A crib, changing table, dresser. All still in boxes so you can decide how you want the room arranged. If you hate any of it, we can exchange it. The furniture boxes were stacked neatly in one corner. Brands I recognized from the expensive baby stores I'd browsed wistfully while pregnant, knowing I'd be buying secondhand from thrift stores and online marketplaces. Dante, this is too much. It's necessary, he corrected gently. Bean needs somewhere safe to sleep, somewhere to store her clothes, somewhere for diaper changes. These are basics, not extravagances. The fact that his basics probably cost more than 3 months of my old rent was something I chose not to dwell on. Thank you, I said instead. Really, this apartment, the furniture, all of it. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. He moved closer, and the room suddenly felt smaller. You don't have to keep thanking me. This is for our daughter. And me, I pointed out. I'm living here too. And you. His gaze held mine. Is that so terrible? Me wanting to take care of you too? The question was loaded with subtext, with the attraction that still hummed between us, despite my attempts to keep things strictly co-parenting. In the hospital, with medical equipment and nurses constantly interrupting, it had been easier to maintain that boundary. Here, alone in the empty nursery with afternoon light making his eyes look almost warm, the boundary felt dangerously thin. It's not terrible, I said carefully. It's just complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated. He reached out slowly, giving me time to step back. When I didn't, his hand settled on my belly, on Bean. But this part she's worth navigating the complicated parts. Bean kicked against his palm, a strong jab that made me wince and him smile. That smile transformed his face, softened the hard edges into something that made my heart stutter. She's active today, he said, trying to ground myself in practical reality. Has been since this morning. I think she's running out of room in there. 6 more weeks, he said, his hand moving gently across the curve of my stomach as Bean shifted. Then we get to meet her. The intimacy of the moment, his hand on my body, our daughter moving between us, the soft light and quiet apartment felt almost overwhelming. This was what I'd denied us for 7 months. This connection, this shared anticipation, this partnership in creating a life. I'm sorry, I blurted out, for not telling you, for keeping her from you all this time. I told myself it was about protection, about safety, but part of it was fear. Fear that you'd take over, that I'd disappear into your world, that I'd lose myself. But you deserved to know. She deserved to have her father from the beginning. Dante's other hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Hey, no. We're not doing this. We're not dwelling on the past 7 months. What matters is now, moving forward, being there for her together. But Emma. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. I'm not angry. I understand why you were scared. My world is scary. I'm scary sometimes. His voice dropped. But I'm asking you to trust me now. Trust that I can keep you both safe. Trust that I won't take over unless you're drowning and need someone to pull you up. Can you do that? Could I? Trust didn't come easily after years of being alone, of relying only on myself. But standing there with his hand on our daughter, his eyes searching mine with unexpected vulnerability, I found myself nodding. I can try. That's all I'm asking. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, the gesture tender in a way that made my defenses crumble a little more. Now, let's figure out where this furniture goes, and then I'm ordering dinner because you need to eat, and I know you haven't had anything since breakfast. The observation that he'd noticed I'd skipped lunch, that he was paying attention to my basic needs, was both touching and slightly alarming. This was what I'd feared, this attentiveness that could so easily slide from caring to controlling. But as we spent the next hour unpacking boxes and debating furniture placement, Dante consistently asked my opinion, deferred to my choices, and adjusted his clearly strong preferences when they conflicted with mine. When I insisted the crib go by the window for natural light, he'd wanted it against an interior wall for security reasons, but he'd yielded after I explained my reasoning. "Fine," he'd said, though his jaw had been tight with the effort of not arguing further. "But I'm installing blackout curtains so she can nap during the day." "That's reasonable," I'd agreed, and watched him visibly relax at the compromise. It was a small thing, insignificant in the scheme of our arrangement, but it felt like proof that maybe, possibly, we could navigate this co-parenting situation without it devolving into a power struggle. By the time dinner arrived, Thai food from a restaurant I'd mentioned liking once during our single night together, which he'd somehow remembered I was exhausted but cautiously optimistic. We ate on the floor of the living room since I didn't own a dining table, and Dante hadn't presumed to buy one. "I can get furniture," he said between bites of pad thai. "Nothing extravagant, just basic so you're not eating on the floor." "I kind of like eating on the floor," I admitted. "It's cozy, informal, normal." He glanced around the mostly empty apartment, my few belongings looking sparse in the spacious rooms, and something shifted in his expression. "When was the last time you had normal, Emma?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because you had to? When did you last see a movie, read a book for pleasure, spent an afternoon doing nothing?" His eyes held mine. "When did you last let yourself just be instead of constantly surviving?" The answer was before my parents died. Before I'd become an orphan at 19, navigating adulthood alone, working multiple jobs to put myself through school, trying to build a life from nothing. But saying that out loud felt too vulnerable, too revealing. "It's been a while," I said instead. Dante set down his food, his expression serious. "I want you to have that back. Normal. Whatever that looks like for you. This arrangement isn't just about Bean having what she needs. It's about you having space to breathe, to be more than someone constantly drowning." "I don't know if I remember how to do that," I admitted quietly. "Then we figure it out together." He reached over, took my hand. "Starting with furniture so you don't have to eat on the floor unless you want to. And maybe a TV, some books. Whatever makes this place feel like home instead of just somewhere you're staying." The offer was tempting, dangerous. Every gift, every kindness, felt like another thread binding me to him. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being bound to someone who wanted to help wasn't the same as being trapped. "Okay," I said, "but nothing crazy expensive. Just normal furniture that normal people have." His lips twitched. "I can do normal." I doubted that very much. Dante Romano didn't do anything normal, but as we finished dinner and he helped me set up my bed in the master bedroom, as he insisted on taking out the trash and checking that all the locks worked properly before he left, I found myself hoping maybe he could learn. At the door, he paused. "I have meetings tomorrow I can't reschedule, but I'll call to check on you, and I'll be at your appointment on Thursday." "You don't have to come to every appointment," I said, though part of me wanted him there. "I want to." His hand came up, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture that felt too intimate for our careful boundaries. "I've missed 7 months of this pregnancy, Emma. Let me be there for the rest of it. How could I say no to that? Thursday at 2, Dr. Castellano's office." "I'll be there." He leaned in, kissed my cheek, his lips lingering just a moment too long. "Lock the door behind me." "And Emma?" "Yeah? Welcome home." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my new apartment with too many feelings and not enough defenses against them. I locked the door as instructed, pressed my hand against my belly where Bean was doing her evening acrobatics, and wondered what I'd just gotten myself into. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm I hadn't expected comfortable. Domestic, almost normal. Despite the undercurrent of attraction, neither of us acknowledged aloud. Dante showed up for every doctor's appointment, sitting beside me in the examination rooms, while Dr. Castellano monitored my blood pressure and Bean's growth. He asked intelligent questions, took notes on his phone about warning signs and medication schedules, and once gently corrected a nurse who'd been dismissive of my concerns about decreased fetal movement. "She knows her daughter's patterns better than anyone," he'd said, his voice polite but carrying an edge that made the nurse immediately call for an ultrasound. Bean had been fine, just sleeping, but Dante's fierce advocacy on my behalf had made something warm bloom in my chest. He brought furniture as promised, a couch in soft gray, a dining table with 4 chairs, a comfortable armchair perfect for late-night feedings. All normal as requested, though I suspected his version of normal cost considerably more than mine. He also brought groceries every few days, claiming he was in the neighborhood anyway, always including the specific prenatal vitamins doctor Castellano had prescribed and fresh fruit he knew I'd been craving. "You don't have to keep doing this," I'd said one evening as he unpacked bags that contained not just groceries, but also a heating pad for my increasingly sore back and the specific brand of ginger tea that helped with lingering nausea. "I know I don't have to," he'd replied, not looking up from organizing the refrigerator with more precision than seemed necessary. "I want to." "The retired nurse from the first floor, Mrs. Chen, no relation, but she'd joked about us being Chen squared, had started checking on me daily. She was a tiny woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of my clinical instructors. She'd examine me with practiced efficiency, check my blood pressure, ask about symptoms, and share stories about the hundreds of babies she'd helped deliver during her 40-year career. "That man of yours is very attentive," she'd observed one afternoon, nodding toward the kitchen where Dante had just stocked the cabinets. "Good father energy. Protective but not smothering. You're lucky." "He's not my man," I'd corrected automatically. "We're just co-parenting." Mrs. Chen had given me a look that suggested she'd heard that particular lie many times before. "If you say so, dear." Now 3 weeks into the arrangement, I was sitting in the nursery attempting to assemble the glider rocker that had been delivered that morning. The instructions might as well have been in ancient Greek for all the sense they made. I'd managed to attach 2 pieces together, but the third seemed determined to go in backward, no matter how I approached it. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, trying to force the armrest into place. "How is anyone supposed to ow?" The piece slipped, pinching my finger between metal components. I jerked back, dropping everything with a clatter. "Emma?" Dante's voice came from the living room. I hadn't even heard him arrive. He had a key now, for emergencies, and had apparently started using it. "You okay?" "Fine," I called back, examining my finger. "No blood, just a painful pinch that would probably bruise. Just fighting with furniture." He appeared in the nursery doorway, still in his work clothes, charcoal suit, burgundy tie, looking every inch the powerful businessman. His eyes immediately zeroed in on me sitting on the floor surrounded by glider pieces, then dropped to the finger I was cradling. "Let me see." He was crouching beside me before I could protest, taking my hand gently. His touch was careful as he examined the injury, thumb brushing over the reddening skin. "It's going to bruise. It's fine. Just stupid of me to try assembling furniture while 9 months pregnant." 8.5 months, he corrected, a hint of smile playing at his lips. "And not stupid, determined. There's a difference." He glanced at the instruction manual, the scattered pieces, and his expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. "Though possibly overly optimistic about your engineering skills, I can build furniture," I said defensively. "I've built lots of furniture." "Uh-huh. Is that why this arm is on backward?" I looked at the partially assembled glider and realized he was right. The arm I'd spent 20 minutes attaching was definitely facing the wrong direction. "I hate you a little bit right now," I informed him. "Noted." He stood, offered his hand to help me up. "Come on, let me handle this. You supervise." "I can do it myself, Emma." He waited until I met his eyes. "I know you can. You can do everything yourself. You've been doing everything yourself for years, but you don't have to anymore. Let me help with the things I'm actually good at, like assembling furniture and intimidating instruction manuals into making sense." The self-deprecating humor surprised a laugh out of me. "Fine. But only because my back is killing me and sitting on the floor wasn't my brightest idea." He helped me up with easy strength, his hand lingering at my lower back where I'd been unconsciously pressing. "Still hurting?" "It's constant at this point. Comes with the territory of carrying a human." I settled into the armchair he'd brought last week, accepting defeat. "Dr. Castellano says it's normal. Just been pressing on nerves." "There are things that can help," he said, already turning his attention to the glider pieces with the focused intensity he brought to everything. "Massage, warm baths, positioning pillows. I have a heating pad." "That's not the same." He consulted the instructions. I began efficiently detaching the backward arm I'd installed. Mrs. Chen mentioned you should be doing prenatal exercises to help with the back pain. Stretches, specifically. When exactly did you and Mrs. Chen have this conversation? This morning when I came by and you were still sleeping. He glanced over his shoulder. She's worried you're not taking care of yourself enough. Says you're always doing something, organizing, cleaning, preparing, never just resting. The betrayal stung a little, even though I knew Mrs. Chen meant well. I'm fine. I rest. Plenty. Emma. He set down the pieces, turned to face me fully. You reorganized your entire kitchen yesterday. I could tell because everything was in different cabinets. I was nesting. It's a pregnancy thing. I know what nesting is. I've read 4 books on pregnancy in the past 3 weeks. He moved closer, crouched in front of my chair so we were eye level. But there's healthy nesting and there's you pushing yourself because you can't sit still. Which is it? The direct question, asked without judgment but with genuine concern, made my defenses crumble. I don't know how to just sit still, I admitted quietly. When I stop moving, I start thinking about everything that could go wrong, about whether I'm ready for this, about whether I'm going to be a terrible mother because I have no idea what I'm doing. His expression softened. You're going to be an amazing mother. You don't know that. I do. He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear in that gesture that it was becoming familiar. You've been putting her needs first since before you even knew you were pregnant. Working yourself to exhaustion to save money for her, making impossible choices to keep her safe, even if those choices meant struggling alone. That's what good mothers do, they sacrifice for their children. That's what I'm afraid of. I whispered. That I'll lose myself in being her mother. That I'll disappear into taking care of her and forget there was ever an Emma who had dreams and goals beyond survival. Understanding flickered in his dark eyes. Is that why you wanted to go back to nursing school? To hold on to that part of yourself? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Dante was quiet for a moment, his hand coming to rest on my knee. What if I told you that you don't have to choose? That you can be Bean's mother and still be Emma who has dreams? That the two aren't mutually exclusive? Easy to say when you have unlimited resources and people to help. Then let's use those resources. He squeezed my knee gently. After Bean is born, after you've recovered and adjusted to motherhood, we'll figure out how to get you back into school. Part-time at first, maybe. Mrs. Chen already mentioned she'd love to help with childcare. And I'll work around your schedule, be there for Bean when you have classes, help with night feedings so you can study. The offer was tempting. Too tempting. Why would you do all that? Because our daughter deserves a mother who's fulfilled, who's pursuing her dreams, who's modeling strength and determination. His thumb traced absent circles on my knee. And because you deserve to be more than just someone's mother, even if that someone is the most important person in both our lives. Tears pricked my eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones making everything more intense. You're making it very hard to maintain boundaries here. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Am I? Yes. You keep being thoughtful and supportive and saying exactly what I need to hear. It's very inconvenient. My apologies, but he didn't sound sorry at all. I'll try to be more of an asshole so you can keep your emotional distance. I laughed despite the tears threatening to fall. That would be helpful, actually. He stood, returned to the glider assembly. Well, I'm not going to do that. So you'll just have to deal with me being insufferably considerate. We fell into comfortable silence as he worked, his movements efficient and precise. I watched him from the chair, noting the way his jacket pulled across his shoulders, the concentration on his face, the careful way he handled each piece. There was something meditative about watching him build something for our daughter, something that made this all feel more real. Can I ask you something? I said after a while. Always. That night, at the gala, why were you alone on that terrace? Everyone else was inside networking and schmoozing, but you were standing outside like you were, trying to escape. His hands paused briefly before continuing. Because I was trying to escape. Those events are necessary for business maintaining relationships, projecting respectability, making sure people see me as legitimate rather than... He trailed off. Rather than what you actually are? I supplied gently. Rather than what they assume I am, he corrected. The reality is more complicated than most people understand. But yes, I was escaping. I'd just spent 3 hours smiling at people I don't trust, making small talk with people I don't like, all while calculating who was a threat and who might be useful. He glanced over his shoulder at me. It's exhausting. being on like that. I needed a moment to just breathe. And then I interrupted. And then you saved me from a spiral of existential dread with shrimp puffs and genuine conversation. He returned to the glider. You didn't want anything from me. Didn't know who I was well enough to be impressed or scared. You just saw a man having a bad night and tried to make it better. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? I was just being nice. You were being human. That's revolutionary when you're surrounded by people who see you as either an opportunity or a threat. He fitted the final piece into place, tested the glider's motion with a satisfied nod. There, done. And it only took a fraction of the time with the correct assembly technique. Show off. I muttered, but I was smiling. He turned, leaned against the dresser, his expression serious. That's why I kept thinking about you after that night. Why I couldn't get you out of my head even though you made it clear it was just one evening. You made me feel normal, Emma. Like I was just a man, not a position or a reputation. And when I saw you at the restaurant, pregnant and struggling, part of me was furious you hadn't told me. But another part— He paused, seeming to search for words. Another part was grateful that our daughter would have your strength, your independence, your humanity. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest tight. Dante, I'm not trying to pressure you, he said quickly. I know we agreed to boundaries, to keep this about co-parenting. But I need you to know that what happened between us wasn't just physical for me. You mattered then, and you matter now. Not just as Bean's mother, but as Emma. I should have reinforced the boundaries. Should have reminded him that we were co-parents, nothing more. But sitting there in the nursery we'd created together, with our daughter moving beneath my hands and his eyes dark with sincerity, I couldn't force the words out. You matter to me too, I admitted quietly. That's what scares me. Because mattering to someone means they can hurt you. And I've been hurt enough for one lifetime. He crossed the room, crouched in front of my chair again, took both my hands in his. I can't promise I'll never hurt you. People who care about each other hurt each other sometimes, even accidentally. But I can promise I'll never deliberately hurt you. Never use my resources or influence to manipulate you. Never make you feel trapped or controlled. His grip tightened gently. And I can promise that if I do hurt you, even unintentionally, you call me on it and I'll do everything in my power to make it right. That's a lot of promises. I'm a man who keeps his word. He brought one of my hands to his lips, pressed a kiss to my knuckles. Even when it's hard. Even when my instincts tell me to take control because that's safer than trusting someone else. I'll keep these promises, Emma. I swear it. Bean chose that moment to deliver a powerful kick directly into my bladder, making me wince. Your daughter has terrible timing. Dante's expression shifted immediately to concern. Are you okay? Is something wrong? Just Bean reminding me that my bladder is now her personal punching bag. I struggled to stand, needing the bathroom urgently. Happens about 50 times a day now. One of the joys of late pregnancy. He helped me up, his hand steadying me when I swayed slightly. The room spun for a moment. I'd stood too quickly, and his arm came around my waist, solid and secure. Easy, he murmured, holding me until the dizziness passed. You okay? I was acutely aware of how close we were, his arm around me, our faces inches apart. This close, I could see the faint scar through his eyebrow, the slight stubble along his jaw, the way his eyes had gone dark and intense. I'm fine. I managed, though my voice came out breathy. Just moved too fast. He didn't let go immediately. His free hand came up to cut my face, thumb brushing over my cheekbone with devastating tenderness. Emma. My name in his mouth sounded like a prayer and a question. I knew what he was asking without him saying it, permission to cross the boundary we'd established, to acknowledge what had been building between us for weeks. I should have stepped back, should have reminded him of our agreement. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my hands coming to rest on his chest where I could feel his heartbeat through the expensive fabric of his shirt. This is a bad idea, I whispered. Probably. His forehead touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. Tell me to stop. But I didn't want him to stop. For 3 weeks, I'd been careful, controlled, maintaining distance even as every interaction pulled us closer. I was tired of being careful, tired of denying the connection that had been there from that first night on the terrace. Don't stop, I breathed. He kissed me then, soft and careful, like I was something precious. His hand cradled the back of my head while his arm around my waist supported my weight. taking the pressure off my aching back. The kiss was nothing like our first, no desperate urgency, no champagne-fueled recklessness. This was deliberate, purposeful, a promise of something deeper than physical, attraction. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes searched mine. Tell me you feel this too, that I'm not imagining the connection between us. I feel it, I admitted. I've been feeling it for weeks. That's why I tried to keep boundaries, because feeling this scared me. And now? Now I'm still scared. I pressed my hand against his chest, over his racing heart. But I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. I'm tired of protecting myself by staying alone. His expression softened with something that looked like hope and determination combined. You're not alone anymore, Emma. You haven't been since the moment you walked into that restaurant. I know you're used to doing everything yourself, but that's not your only option now. I'm still figuring out how to accept that. I paused, and I really need to pee. Your daughter is very insistent about that. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, his whole face transforming with it. Go. We'll talk more after you take care of Bean's demands. I made my way to the bathroom, my mind racing faster than my awkward pregnant waddle. What had I just done? Kissing Dante? Admitting my feelings? Essentially throwing our careful co-parenting arrangement into chaos? But looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, seeing the flush in my cheeks and the brightness in my eyes, I didn't feel the panic I'd expected. I felt hopeful. Terrified, yes, but also hopeful that maybe, possibly, this could work. That we could be more than two people sharing a child. That we could be partners in the truest sense. When I emerged, Dante was testing the glider, his large frame looking slightly ridiculous in the chair meant for feeding a baby. He glanced up when I entered, and the smile he gave me was unguarded, genuine, nothing like the careful masks I'd seen him wear with others. Come here, he said, standing and guiding me to the glider. Try it out. Make sure it's comfortable before Bean arrives. I settled into the chair, and he was right, it was perfectly comfortable, with just the right amount of rock. He'd positioned it by the window as I'd wanted, with the blackout curtains he'd promised installed to one side. It's perfect, I said. Good. He crouched beside the chair, his hand finding my belly where Bean was doing her evening gymnastics routine. 6 more weeks, little one. Then we get to meet you. 5 weeks and 4 days, I corrected. Not that I'm counting. Of course not. His thumb traced circles on my stomach. Are you scared? About the birth? Terrified, I admitted. I've studied it. I know what to expect medically, but actually going through it? Bringing a whole human into the world? That's... I trailed off, unable to find adequate words. I'll be there, he said quietly. Every moment if you want me there. Holding your hand, supporting you, whatever you need. Even if I scream at you and blame you for getting me pregnant in the first place? A smile tugged at his lips. Especially then, I can take it. We sat there for a while, his hand on my belly, the evening light fading to dusk through the window. This was what I'd been missing, I realized. Not just help with practical things, not just financial support or furniture assembly. This companionship, partnership, someone to share the weight of bringing a life into the world. Thank you, I said softly. For what? For being here. For being patient with my boundaries and my fear. For not trying to control everything even though I know that's your instinct. I covered his hand with mine. For proving that maybe I was wrong about not being able to trust you. His eyes held mine in the dimming light. I'll spend every day earning that trust, Emma. I promise you that. And looking at him, at the father of my child, at the man who'd somehow become essential to my life in just 3 weeks, at the person who made me feel less alone than I'd been in years, I believed him. The boundaries we'd established were dissolving, replaced by something more real, more complicated, and infinitely more terrifying. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some risks were worth taking, even for someone who'd spent years protecting herself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. Stay for dinner, I said. I was going to make pasta. Nothing fancy, but there's enough for 2. His smile was slow and warm. I'd like that. As we moved to the kitchen together, his hand finding the small of my aching back in support, I let myself imagine a future where this was normal, where we cooked dinner together, raised our daughter together, built a life together despite the complications and dangers and uncertainties. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But for the first time since I discovered I was pregnant, I wasn't facing the future alone, and that made all the difference. 3 weeks later, at 2:47 a.m., my water broke. I was standing in the nursery, unable to sleep, rearranging onesies for the third time that week when I felt the unmistakable gush. For a moment I just stood there, frozen in disbelief. Oh no, not yet. We still have 10 days. Another contraction hit, stronger than the Braxton Hicks I'd been having for days. This was real. My hands shook as I called Dante. He answered on the first ring. Emma? What's wrong? My water broke. My voice came out surprisingly calm. I think we're having a baby tonight. I'm on my way. 5 minutes. Pack your bag. Call Mrs. Chen and Emma. His voice dropped, intense and sure. Breathe. I've got you. He arrived in 4 minutes, probably breaking every traffic law. Mrs. Chen came up to lock the apartment while Dante loaded my bag and helped me to his car. His hand never left mine. The labor was long, 14 hours of contractions, epidurals that barely worked, Dante coaching me through every push while I alternately clung to him and cursed his existence. I hate you. I panted during a particularly brutal contraction. This is your fault. I know, he murmured, pressing a cool cloth to my forehead. You can hate me all you want. Just keep breathing. At 4:23 p.m., Olivia Grace Romano, we'd finally agreed on a name at hour 12, entered the world, screaming her displeasure at the bright lights and cold air. She's perfect, Dante breathed, tears streaming down his face as the nurse placed her on my chest. Emma, she's absolutely perfect. I couldn't speak through my own tears, could only stare at the tiny, furious creature we'd made. She had Dante's dark hair, my nose, and lungs that suggested she'd inherited both our stubborn temperaments. Dante pressed a kiss to my temple, his hand cradling Olivia's head with infinite gentleness. Thank you. For her, for letting me be here, for giving me a chance I didn't deserve. We both deserved a chance, I whispered, looking up at him. At this. At us. At us. He repeated, and kissed me softly while our daughter squirmed between us. She's definitely got your personality, I observed, watching Olivia refuse her bottle with the same stubborn determination Dante showed in business meetings. Completely convinced she's right about everything. She gets that from you, Dante countered, trying again. Olivia turned her head away dramatically. See? Stubborn, I laughed, taking her from him. She latched immediately for me, giving him a smug look that was pure Romano attitude. Traitor, he muttered, but he was smiling. We'd moved into his penthouse last month not because he'd insisted, but because it made sense. More space, better security, and honestly, we'd been spending every night together anyway. The boundaries we'd established had dissolved naturally, replaced by late-night feedings, shared exhaustion, and the deep intimacy of raising a child together. I enrolled, I said casually. Spring semester, 2 classes to start. Dante looked up sharply. Nursing school. You said I could be both. Olivia's mother and Emma with dreams. I shifted our daughter to my shoulder for burping. I'm choosing to believe you. His smile was brilliant. Mrs. Chen's going to be thrilled. She's been asking when you'd go back. He moved closer, wrapped his arms around us both. I'm proud of you. Don't make me cry again. I just stopped being hormonal. He laughed, kissed my forehead, then Olivia's. I love you, Emma Chen. I should have said it months ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you. My breath caught. I love you too, even when you're being controlling and overprotective and impossible. Especially then, he teased. Olivia burped loudly, making us both laugh. She approves, I said. Good. Dante's hand found mine, fingers interlacing. Because this is forever. You, me, Olivia, whatever comes next. I'm not letting go. Looking at him, at the man who'd caught me when I fell, who'd fought for us when I was too scared to fight for myself, who'd become my partner in every sense I knew he meant it. Forever, I agreed. And surrounded by the chaos of new parenthood, the joy of unexpected love, and the promise of a future we'd build together, I'd never felt more certain of anything. This was just the beginning. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel